I want to talk a little bit this evening about Israel and the threats that Israel still faces. You know, it's the 60th anniversary of the founding of the state, a young state. I was born in 1948 myself. I think it's a very young state. But despite the enormous successes that freedom has had in the world with the end of the Cold War, the collapse of the Soviet Union, and the receding of the threat that we lived with for so many years, the threat of an exchange of nuclear salvos between the United States and the Soviet Union that surely would have eliminated civilization as we know it. We can't rest easily, even though the Cold War is over, because while that particular kind of threat has disappeared, the threat of the use of nuclear weapons used as terrorist weapons, really, against the United States and against its friends and allies around the world has not ended. And while we may not face the kind of Cold War threat to our friends, our small, vulnerable nations like Israel, it doesn't take a Cold War exchange of nuclear weapons to constitute an existential threat. And Israel, in particular, living in a very dangerous neighborhood, sees this on a daily basis. And I think it's important that we understand the nature of the threat and what we need to do, particularly in the United States, to support Israel and to work for the common objective of eliminating the threat of nuclear proliferation. This is why President Bush, for example, some years ago referred to the risk of what he called a nuclear holocaust that Israel continues to face, and that is even more acute today than it was several years ago, and I think likely to grow more acute indeed as we approach what is potentially a crisis point for Israel in dealing with this. And it's a threat that is global in nature as well, something that has caused the United States to extend assistance to many countries around the world that fear nuclear weapons in the hands of rogue states. In the case of Iran, in the case of North Korea, and of other states whose leaders are watching Iran and North Korea to see how we deal with the problem they pose. It's a threat in the region of the Middle East, but it's a global threat too. I've spent a good part of the last 8 years, for example, trying to convince people that North Korea is a major threat in the Middle East. And usually when I say that, people get a quizzical expression on their face. They think maybe I've been in the State Department too long and I've kind of lost perspective. But the fact is that North Korea, for many years, has been the world's largest proliferator of ballistic missiles and ballistic missile technology, selling to regimes like Saddam Hussein's Iraq, to Iran, to Syria, and to others. And this focus on research and development in ballistic missiles is not because of an abstract interest in physics in North Korea. It's because this capability allows nations that possess sophisticated ballistic missiles to deliver nuclear warheads. That's the reason for the research. The ballistic missile program really is inseparable from the nuclear weapons program. We've known for many years of the cooperation between North Korea and Iran, among others, on this issue. We've long suspected that there has been cooperation on the nuclear weapons front as well. But it didn't fall to our intelligence services or our friends or Israel's or others really to have hard evidence of this until last year, when we saw a North Korean nuclear reactor being constructed on the banks of the Euphrates River in Syria. And this was not something that the United States knew anything about. In the spring of last year, Israeli officials brought this knowledge to the attention of senior officials in the U.S. government. And it was something that caught the United States by surprise. But with additional information that we were able to assemble, it became clear that, in fact, this was a North Korean reactor. And as the government of Israel had said when they first brought this information to our attention, they said, if it doesn't stop, we're going to take action to destroy it, which in fact was done in September of last year. Now, it is inconceivable that Syria would engage in this kind of cooperation with North Korea, construction that had been underway for 5 or 6 years. Inconceivable that that work would go forward without, at a minimum, the approval of the government of Iran, and most likely, I think, the active support of the government of Iran through financing and technology, really making this reactor in Syria a three-way joint venture between Iran, North Korea, and the Syrians. After all, North Korea and Iran shared the same incentive to hide from international inspectors the illicit work that they're doing in the nuclear weapons field. And I think that's very much what was going on in Syria. Now, the fact is that in Iran we have a state that's extremely dangerous on a number of different levels. Not only has Iran been pursuing nuclear weapons in a clandestine fashion for nearly 20 years, it is also the world's central banker for international terrorism. And you know, we read a lot, we talk a lot about the split within Islam between Sunni and Shia and some of the other factions. I'd have to say that Iran proves that you can be an equal opportunity supporter of terrorism, because they fund not only Hezbollah in Lebanon, they fund Hamas in the Gaza Strip, they fund both Sunni and Shia terrorists in Iraq who are active against our own American and other allied forces there. And in fact, Iran funds its former sworn enemy, the Taliban, in Afghanistan, because all of these groups share a common objective: to attack the United States, to attack Israel, to attack our friends and allies. And that is the kind of influence that Iran seeks to exert in the Middle East and geographically, and in the Islamic world more generally. So in addition to the support for terrorism, its pursuit of nuclear weapons demonstrates that it poses a very real threat, not just in the Middle East, but around the world. And we have seen over the past nearly 6 years now, really extraordinary diplomatic efforts designed to dissuade Iran from continuing to pursue this nuclear weapons capability. The European Union, Britain, France, and Germany in particular, have been in negotiation with Iran during this entire period. And they've made a very simple point over and over again, that if Iran would simply suspend a critical aspect of its nuclear program, the enrichment of uranium to reactor and then weapons grade levels, if Iran would only suspend this activity, it could have a different relationship with the European Union, and in fact it could have a different relationship with the United States.